a good crew. So good morning to everybody. I just want to thank all of our customers, prospects, partners, everybody who's on the line, as well as my fellow Qumulons. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Jessica Rago, and I'm the Field Marketing Manager for the central team here at Qumulo. And I'm going to be acting as your host for today's program. So if you don't know who Qumulo is, don't worry, we've got some great speakers lined up who's going to give you the insight. Our first speaker is Ben Gittenstein. He's our VP of product here, and he'll be giving you a glimpse into who we are and where data storage trends are heading.
Thanks.
And then,
oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Please, Jessica, go ahead.
No worries, Ben. And then my favorite part of the program is when we hear from our customers. So we've got Jason. He's the Director of Information Technology at the Arizona Public Media. And Jason spent the last 15 years designing and maintaining shared storage solutions for television productions and server virtualization. And then from there, we're going to have Brandon Williams. Big shout out to him. He's from our Texas team, and he's going to be giving us a live demo. So before we get started, just a couple reminders. We value transparency here at Qumulo, so I just want to let everybody know we are recording this presentation today. And we also love questions. So we want this to be interactive. Please use the chat feature to ask any questions that you have along the way. But a quick reminder to direct it to both the panelists and attendees. We will be selecting 2 people at random who ask these questions at the end of the webinar and will be receiving prizes. Those winners will be emailed on Monday and receive those prizes then. Also, when you registered, you probably saw you'll be receiving a $30 Uber Eats gift card. So you can be on the lookout for that with the email address you registered for this event with, and you'll be receiving that at the end of this week. So with that, let's jump into it. Ben, you're our first presenter today. You out there?
I am. Hey, thanks, Jessica. And thank you to everybody who's joined us today. I'm super excited to talk to all of you. It is honestly, one of my favorite parts of my job is being able to talk to the actual human beings out there who manage large storage environments. And I think that for me, one of the reasons I find that so exciting is because of the role that you play in your organizations. And that's one of the reasons, to be frank, I'm so excited to talk to Jason, because, you know, I think one of the things we overlook in our world is that storage and infrastructure are what make it possible for organizations to achieve their mission. And in particular, in the world that we play in unstructured data, you know, the kind of data that we work with and that our customers manage is not data about their business, it's data that is their business. If you are providing public media, if you are making a movie, if you are sequencing a genome, if you are doing research computing in a university, I mean, any of those scenarios, if you're providing video surveillance, that data is what makes it possible for your organization to do what the organization sets out to do as a company. And so I just find it super inspiring to talk to folks, and I'd much rather be in these meetings than my, annual budget planning. So I'm really excited to be here. Let's jump right in. I'm Ben Gittenstein. I run product here at Qumulo. I've been here for a while. I've been here for over 6 years, and I've seen pretty much every major evolution of our product and services. And I'm just really excited to talk to all of you about what we do, why we do it, and how it could help customers like you achieve your organization's missions. Let's start with the world around us. I don't think this is news to all of you, but I like to start with why. And this is a good grounding for me in what's really going on in the world around us and what gives Qumulo our purpose. The fact of the matter is data is growing much faster than it ever grew before. In particular, unstructured data is growing much faster. So files, objects, logs, videos, images, sound files, genomic sequences, like all of that data is growing just crazy fast. And it's growing for a couple of reasons. It's growing because the devices that create it are proliferating. So there are more sensors in the world. There are more sequencers in the world. There are more cameras. There are more machines that create data than ever before. And the number of those machines is only going up. Also, those machines are creating denser data. So it's not uncommon now to see a 4K video, 4K camera installed on a wall, which is, I mean, that used to be a kind of a nuts idea, and now it's pretty commonplace. And the machines, a genomic sequencer creates more sequences today in an hour than it used to just a couple of years ago. The problem is that data growth is growing at one rate, but the budgets and resources that all of you have to manage that data and to serve it to your end users and to keep and store it reliably is not growing at the same pace. I was looking at some data from IDC, which is sort of they're the analyst, one of the big analysts that study our space, our market. I was looking at some of that data a couple of days ago, and it talked about that there's basically a 4x difference between the rate of data growth and the rate of budget growth or spend. That's just unsustainable. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. And that puts all of you in a really, really difficult spot where you're going to have to make really tough choices between what data do you keep and what data do you not. I mean, data rationing, that's a real problem. You're going to have to make real choices about people, because with the way a lot of technology works today, you have to use a lot of human beings and human hours to manage brittle storage infrastructure. And lastly, it just creates a lot of stress. I mean, it just makes life very challenging when you don't have the resources you need to manage the data you're being asked to serve. The result of that is like a very real set of problems. You find yourself asking, like, will my future platform, will the platform that I've embraced today for my infrastructure, will it meet my needs in the future? Or am I fundamentally out of step? Is my infrastructure strategy not pointed in the correct direction? You got a complex and expensive system to manage. That's never good. Complex and expensive systems hinder innovation. They don't strengthen it. Working with your storage vendor that is happily gobbling up all of your spend for storing all of that unstructured data is not simple, and you got to deal with really complex customer support issues. You got to open tickets and escalate to a manager just to get a question answered. You've got very unintelligent infrastructure, so you're being asked to serve AI and ML workloads from your end users, but you're not getting to use that information to power the storage itself and make better decisions on your end. Then, of course, there's the cloud. Like, while that data growth is happening, so is the move to the public cloud. That's all happening at the same time. And your CIOs or directors or boards are saying, hey, we got to go get cloudy because it helps us become agile, nimble, and global. But your storage vendor is basically telling you either you can't go or you have to go all in on our terms. And that's no good. And then lastly, we talked about this before, but like, just human beings are getting stretched thin. The IT administrator that has to manage this infrastructure is being pulled in a lot of different directions. And that's just unfair and it's unsustainable. So now we're going to talk about Qumulo. What do we do? Well, Qumulo provides a unified file data management platform that we believe frees the file system from its previous constraints. Now, I'm going to talk in a little bit about what that means from a technology standpoint. Brandon's going to give you a demo of what it looks like in practice. You'll be able to see how easy it is to get information about your unstructured data, how easy it is to create a file system and to move data. All of that is, you'll see that firsthand. But fundamentally, we build a really massive scale file system that is freed from proprietary hardware, that's surrounded by world-class customer-focused support, meaning that there's a Slack channel for you filled with smart people who actually know how our products work, and they are former sysadmins, so they know what you're going through, and they're there to answer questions, not open tickets. That product gives you a true hybrid cloud environment, so you can move to the cloud on your own terms whenever you're ready. By the way, technically, the way we do that is providing the same software on premises and in the public cloud, and then data movement technologies between the two. We make it easier to go to the public cloud by de-risking your cloud migration. So when you're ready, you can move your workload directly to the public cloud. And if it worked on premises against Qumulo, it will work in the public cloud against Qumulo because it's the same product. And that leads to the other big cloud benefit, which is you don't need to re-architect. You don't need to say, okay, well, now I got to rewrite this entire application to assume some sort of object storage protocol under the backend, even though it's a file application. No, this is a file offering on premises and in the public cloud. You don't need to rewrite anything. And it's hyperscale. So we can serve as if you have a petabyte of data on premises and you're ready to move that petabyte of data into the public cloud and bring that petabyte data workflow into the public cloud, it'll work just fine with Qumulo in AWS, GCP, or Azure. Simply put, that's because our mission is to help customers build petabyte scale file data lakes really, really simply. We want to make complex problems easy, and we do that. In particular, we could focus that sort of approach on making pants or chairs or compute, and we have chosen to focus that approach on making large scale file data lakes. That's our organizing problem. And we do that for customers in the cloud or on premises. And that's really important. I know I've talked a fair amount about the public cloud today, but it's really important to remember that we think of those two things as being equal. Whether you want to run a petabyte of data and many gigabytes a second of throughput, or not very many gigabytes a second of throughput in your data center or in the public cloud, we want to help you with both. And from a business and technology standpoint, we're completely agnostic. That's your choice, not ours. We do that with technology partners. So we do that with AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud in the public cloud. And then on premises, we do it with HPE, Fujitsu, and Supermicro. So you have a lot of choice and a lot of flexibility. As we think, so now let's talk a little bit about what Qumulo actually is. Like, what is this thing that I've been talking so much about? Let's start with the data lifecycle, which is really that's a central primitive idea for us here at Qumulo, which is how does data move? How does data change over time? Well, first of all, data is always written by something. We call that the ingest phase, but I'm sure you have your own term for it. And it's in our world, it's almost always a machine. It's a sequencer, it's a camera, it's a car that's spitting out LiDAR data, it's a sensor, something usually that is a machine, might be a compute farm, creates large amounts of data. Then that data moves into a transformation phase. And in that phase, either a very expensive end user, a data scientist, an editor, a business analyst, is transforming that data, often using large scale computes, maybe 1,000 node compute farm or GPUs or CPUs, or maybe just a really powerful workstation, but they're transforming that data from something raw to some sort of finished product or discovery. Then once they've moved through that phase, they then need to publish it. So now the data has been transformed. Now you push it out to a whole other group of end users or to a playout system, or maybe to the public cloud where it can reside for the long term. And finally, you archive it. There's some portion of that data that needs to live for the long term in your system. The whole purpose of the Qumulo file data platform is to offer you one namespace that can serve the entirety of this lifecycle. Of course, we offer different products. Some are faster, some are slower. But at its heart, the purpose of this product is to say, don't worry about that. Just put it all in your Qumulo namespace and we can serve the entire lifecycle for you. Now, what makes that possible is our software. And that's because at our heart, we are a software company and we build this thing called Qumulo Core, which is our file system that runs uniformly everywhere our product works. It's the same software in AWS, GCP, HPE, Fujitsu, Supermicro, it's all the same. That software has 7 data services in it. Qumulo Scale, that's our ability. That's what makes it possible for us to build, a many hundred node system serving 30 to 50 to 100 petabytes of data. And then Qumulo Perform, which is that's the machine learning that we use to make sure your data lives on the hottest media and that we can prefetch data for you so we can handle the most demanding workflows. Qumulo Aware, you're going to see some demos of that today, but really Qumulo Aware is our founding innovation. It's where you can see what's actually going on in your workloads inside of the storage in real time. Qumulo Shift is a product or data service that we offer that enables you to, for free, move data into AWS S3 as a native object, and then shift it back. So you can get any data from AWS S3, bring it right into Qumulo and use it for no charge. Integrate is our API. We have a full, complete self-documenting API, which you can use to automate your storage end to end. Qumulo Protect, those are the technologies that we use to keep your data safe. It can be safe and coupled with Qumulo Secure, they're all about safety and security. So Qumulo Protect includes things like protection against a hardware failure because disk drives die. So how do we keep your data safe from that? But then also replication and snapshot technology to keep your data safe from disaster in one side of your data center, or from end user error, or from attack. And then of course, Qumulo Secure. At the heart of Qumulo Secure is encryption. Every Qumulo file system is encrypted at rest by default for free and with no performance penalty. We use AES 256, the highest grade encryption available, and that's available for no charge. In fact, we don't even really make it possible for you to turn it off because there's really no action you need to take, and it just keeps your data safe. We also have some other supporting technologies which are really important, RBAC, audit, whatnot, but at its heart is encryption. All of that Qumulo core is awesome software, but the software has to run somewhere. In your data center, it runs on Server Queue, and Server Queue gives you three major options. There's HPE, so we run on both their Apollo line and their DL line. So you can have a hybrid flash and disk product in Apollo, or you can have an all NVMe product in DL. We run on Supermicro. Today, we only offer an LNVMe product, but it's very effective, it's very efficient, and it's a great deal. And then we also support Fujitsu. In the public cloud, you can run Qumulo Core on Google Cloud and on AWS as an image, as software that you manage. We make it very, very simple to deploy and very, very easy to scale. In Microsoft Azure, we actually offer a fully managed software service. So you'll never have to do an upgrade in Azure. You simply pay for what you use as you go, and we take care of the rest, including scaling it for you. All of those deployments are the same, meaning that they're all multi-protocol, they're all scalable, they all have the same APIs, they all work the same, they just deploy differently. And then of course, all of that is surrounded by Qumulo Care, which provides proactive monitoring support and real-time communication with our experts in Slack. So one of the central ideas at Qumulo as a product organization is to constantly innovate and constantly deliver. So here you can just see a picture of all the stuff that we have delivered from 2015 when I first joined the company to today. You know, it's been a long journey. There has been relentless innovation from Qumulo, and it's a huge effort to build all of that, especially as an enterprise infrastructure product where you can't just ship toy features, you have to ship things that you know customers can rely on. But I will say at the heart of this culture of innovation is the notion of shipping every 2 weeks. So we provide a new software upgrade every 2 weeks. It's yours to take or not take. You can wait and either upgrade quarterly or just once a year. However often you'd like to upgrade, we make that simple, easy, and non-disruptive. But we do offer a new capability every 2 weeks. And the reason we do that is it forces us as an engineering and product organization to constantly be delivering and constantly be learning from our customers. Okay, now I'm going to brag a little bit about what we've accomplished as a company, because that's part of my job as an executive here at Qumulo. One of the things we're most proud of is the recognition we get from organizations like Gartner. We've now been named a leader in our market, which is the distributed file and object market. For 4 years in a row, we're in the leader quadrant. We're actually the furthest to the right. We have the most complete vision, according to Gartner, in our market. Gartner's great. I love talking to those guys. They're super helpful, but that's not what's interesting about them. What's interesting about them is that in order to do that ranking, they get to call our customers and ask them, hey, do you actually like Qumulo's product and use it? And they get to look at our business and look deep inside our product. And after doing that deep inspection of our customers' product and business, they then make their assessment of who we are as a company and how well we play. And that's why we get so proud of how they talk about us. But it's not just Gartner that sees that. Other analysts see it. And maybe most importantly, we maintain a really high net promoter score. Now, I know a lot of vendors say that, but I'll just say, like, we actually measure our NPS score using NPS standard tactics or techniques. And what's really cool about it is that it's super flat and level. Like, our NPS has been at 89 for something like eight quarters in a row. We've been over 85 for, I think, 11 quarters now. So it's just like we have figured out how to keep customers happy and enjoying our products and services, and that's something we're super proud of. So I'm going to talk about a couple customers other than what Jason does, and then I'm going to stop, I promise, and I'm going to turn it over to Jason, who's the more interesting part of the show anyways. So for those of you who maybe work in healthcare, hopefully this resonates. Dayton Children's is a hospital that we serve as, they're one of our customers. They store PACS and medical imaging data on Qumulo. They serve that and serve that to their end users, off medical professionals, whether those be doctors, nurses, MRI techs. And they use Qumulo as a central part of their daily operations, meaning we really help them run the hospital. And again, we don't provide their business systems or payroll systems or any of that sort of data. We provide the medical imaging that is the business itself of running the hospital. San Diego Supercompute out here on the West Coast is it's part of a research university complex, and they use Qumulo. Actually, they serve it out to their end users, who are almost all researchers. And one of the big projects that's done by San Diego Supercompute is tracking wildfires using video, image, and log data. And they then use high performance computing workflows with large scale compute farms against that data and against a Qumulo system in order to build pictures of where wildfires are growing or shrinking, and to make predictive models about how those wildfires are going to change in the future. And San Diego Supercompute, I think, is representative for us of a very large and growing segment in our business, which is research universities. I think we have over 50 research universities at this point use Qumulo in a major way in order to provide storage for their end users. And then, of course, media and entertainment. This was media and entertainment was one of our founding markets. Cinesight is an organization that makes shows like The Witcher, which is, I think, pretty cool. It's a pretty good show. They use Qumulo both on premises and in AWS in order to make really great content. Usually that looks like editorial, which is for those of you who maybe aren't in M&E, that's a really high-powered end-user workstation doing really intensive single-stream work against a Qumulo system. Or they do big rendering jobs, which is a big distributed compute job with lots and lots of render nodes inside of a compute farm, really hammering away at a Qumulo to process data in a big parallelized way. What's really cool is they run that same workload both on premises and in the public cloud. And in the public cloud, they've gotten into the millions of IOPS using our AWS products, which is really exciting to see. But that's a bunch of blather from me about the company that I'm a part of. It's not the interesting stuff. The interesting stuff is with our good friend Jason here, who's going to talk to us about what it's actually like to be a Qumulo customer. So Jason, I'm gonna bring you on now. Thanks for turning on your video. Why don't you just quickly say hi and introduce yourself to the crew here?
Good morning. I am Jason Katterhenry. I'm the Director of IT for Arizona Public Media. We are the PBS and NPR affiliate in Tucson, Arizona, associated with the University of Arizona. We have 3 television stations, 4 radio stations, and an online news organization.
And how long have you been with Arizona Public Media at this point?
I've been with Arizona Public Media since 2006.
Wow. Wow. You must have seen a lot of changes in the public media life over that time.
Yes, it has been an exciting 15 years there, for sure.
I bet. Maybe let's start with a little bit of your life sort of before Qumulo. What storage were you using before you chose Qumulo, and what did you like or not like about that environment?
So before Qumulo, we actually had 2 separate shared fiber systems, one for our operational infrastructure, which comprised our VMware cluster, and then a shared fiber system on Xsan for our Apple edit suites. And the problems we had with both of those were similar, actually. Number one, it was hard to get data as to what was actually going on in them. If someone complained or there was an issue, the troubleshooting step was kind of difficult. And then the other was the issue you have with systems like that, which is you can add capacity or you can add throughput, but adding both was costly or took a lot of downtime to actually restructure that.
Right.
And so in 2018, when we were looking at refreshing those, we were looking at scale out NAS solutions to solve both of those problems.
Got it. Great. Well, so now maybe take us through to what brought you to choosing Qumulo and what it's been like to be a Qumulo customer.
Honestly, the thing that I like most about Qumulo when we were looking at all the options was the admin interface. It's not a thing you think of as important when you're looking at storage. You tend to not consider the thing you'll be looking at. But the way it was able to show the capacity used, what the throughput was, it seemed like it was going to be very easy for me to actually manage, which is important for me. I manage a team of one other person, so it's myself and someone else having to deal with the storage array. And with the other systems, maybe once a month, twice a month, we'd have some weird issue that I was tracking down. And my main goal was to be able to solve those issues. And so I had hoped that Qumulo would do that for me.
Well, I mean, can you talk a little bit about what kinds of issues you tend to see in that environment? What are the kinds of things that keep you up at night?
Well, so we have two television shows that we produce, and both of them have deliverables on Friday. And so inevitably, everyone would wait till the last minute, and I'd have 4 or 5 workstations trying to push out now 4K video, and it would just grind to a halt, and I would have to tell someone to stop their export so that we could do it in series rather than parallel.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what it is about life, but for whatever reason, when you create a deadline, you ensure that there will always be last minute work right up until that deadline. I don't know how that we as human beings have not figured that out yet. Doesn't matter how many classes we take on it. Okay, well, so talk a little bit about your experience with Qumulo so far. What's that been like? What have you liked? What have you not liked?
So the thing I like is that since we've put it in, I have not had anyone complain to me that it's not working, which is basically the best thing that I could have possibly imagined. You go through it, you spec it out to make sure it's going to hit all the requirements you think it's going to meet, you do all the tests, but then you deploy it and the users are going to do what they do. And we haven't had any issues at all. And the issues that we do have are people complaining about not a space and a quota or something like that. And I can dive right into the admin interface and sort of solve those issues. I know in the opening slides, you talked a little bit about all the APIs and the data you can get out of it. But as a shop of 2 people, I just don't have the time or the manpower to actually build my own tool set. And so having a really great tool set just come for free on the array has been one of the greatest features of that array.
That makes a lot of sense. Maybe talk a little bit about the future. How do you see Arizona public media changing in the future? What do you think the world looks like for you in a couple years? And then at the end of that, maybe talk a little bit about how you'd like to see Qumulo evolve. And just to be transparent with everybody else on the call, these are the conversations as the head of product that I always want Qumulo to be having with our customers. I want us never to stand still. I want us to always listen to what our customers need. And I'm happy to do that in front of 100 prospects here today. So Jason, maybe talk a little bit about Arizona public media, how you think the world is going to change for you, and then what you'd love to see out of Qumulo in the future.
So like most organizations, we were pretty much on-prem till about March of 2020. And then we were forced to figure out new workflows. And so we initially did that by, punching holes through the firewall and VPN and things that all the organizations did just to get access to on-prem. But it was about that time that I was approached by Qumulo about trialing their shift to S3, and I was extremely excited about that. We have relationships as a university with Amazon, so I was able to get started with some S3 buckets and test moving media up there, just to be able to have a second place to store it as a new way of disaster recovery, but also to share it with producers who might be working remotely. They certainly wouldn't be editing on that, but getting media up and back as a transfer mechanism is going to be a great way for us to work.
That's awesome. That's great. What are some things what are some interesting problems you think Qumulo could solve in the future that would be helpful to sort of accelerating your business or making your life easier?
Yeah, I think so. Along those disaster recovery lines, I think sort of more automated ways to choose different locations, whether it's S3 or NFS or just some other place to put it, and then schedule those things and have a way to do checksumming to make sure everything that is where it's supposed to be without me having to think about it, right? Anything that Qumulo can do to make sure that I don't have to think about my data, which I really haven't in the past 4 years, is great.
That's a great idea. Great idea. I just wrote it down. That's a great request. I like it. Okay, well, that's all of my questions. And I think, first of all, Jason, I just want to say thank you for being such an awesome customer, and thank you for taking your time today to do this session with us. I think now would be a good time to pause for a second and hand the mic over to Brandon to give folks an actual tour of the product itself. And so before I do that, thank you again, Jason. Brandon, why don't you come on off video and mic and mute, and maybe I'm gonna fade into the background here.
Perfect. Thanks, Ben and Jason. Let me get this shared up here, and we will be off to the races. So as Jessica mentioned, my name is Brandon Williams. I'm a systems engineer here at Qumulo, based out of Dallas, Texas. And over the next 12, 15 minutes or so, we're just gonna go through a simple demo of the Qumulo platform. What we're gonna be demonstrating today is actually using Qumulo for disaster recovery purposes, where we have an existing Qumulo file system, but are also going to stand up a Qumulo file system in AWS, configure replication, show you what it looks like to fail over to a Qumulo file system in AWS, and the process to actually fail back to the way things were in its original state. So the first process that we're going to go through, though, is we're going to start with creating that Qumulo file system. So when we log into our AWS dashboard here, we deploy Qumulo using CloudFormation, and we can see that this Qumulo, or this AWS environment, no Qumulo file systems currently exist. So the first thing that we want to do is to kick off that process to create a net new Qumulo file system in AWS. And we're going to do that using Terraform. So got a nice little prepared Terraform script here that we're going to kick off. As that runs, if I switch back over to my AWS tenant, I can see, just quick refresh the page here, that there is a create in process for this Qumulo file system. Makes it very simple, very easy to kickstart that process. And through the magic of video editing, and because I tell terrible jokes, I'm going to speed this process up. But we can see in about 2 minutes, we were able to create a Qumulo file system in AWS. Now we're going to log into that file system we've created, and we can see that this is a very plain file system. There's no data on it, no capacity being consumed. But in a matter of minutes, I was able to quickly stand up a file system with all the goodness of Qumulo right here in my AWS infrastructure. Every Qumulo file system, when deployed, has a default share. So we've got, of course, a files share, which is the root of the file system. You can create multiple shares, set permissions accordingly, but just showing you that there is a default share that we already have created. And then a best practice, in this case, when we create the cluster via Terraform, it sets a random password for us that we've already grabbed out of the output from when that was run. So I want to go in here and I want to change my default password for the admin user to something that I can remember. We'll go ahead and save that. But now that I've got my file system up and running, I've got my admin password set. The next thing we want to do is, let's connect to this file system from my Windows desktop. So we're going to open up a Windows Explorer here and browse to that Qumulo file system. So I grab the IP address of that file system right here from the admin dashboard. We'll pop that into Windows Explorer, and we'll be prompted with authentication, which is where having that password I can remember becomes helpful. So we'll authenticate as that admin user. And once authenticated, I will see that files share that we showed when we were looking at the dashboard. So this is, again, just that default share, no data within it. So the next thing we want to do here is actually look at an existing Qumulo file system. So I mentioned we're going to set up replication. We have another Qumulo file system that already exists. So we're going to connect to that file system, show you that we have some data that exists on it, and just, kind of help you understand, what that looks like. So Qumulo 1 is our primary file system, or you can think of it as an on-prem file system, if you will. It's a different file system, so I need to authenticate against it as well. And once authenticated, I can, of course, see that I've got that same standard files share, but there's also an SMB share that's been created here. And if I begin to browse the file share, I can see that there's some directories and some data that exists on this file system. If I pull up the UI for this on-premise file system, that Qumulo 1, you can see that there's about 1.7 gigs of data that currently exists, a couple of files, a few directories. There's not a lot of data on here. We try to keep it simple for the demo, but we can see that there is data on this file system. And now what we want to do is we want to replicate this data from my primary Qumulo file system to my Qumulo file system in AWS. And the way we do that is we create replication relationships. Replication inside of Qumulo is done at the directory level. So I'm specifying what's the path on my primary Qumulo file system, what's the destination I want to replicate to on my secondary Qumulo file system, and then I provided the IP address of what's the Qumulo file system that I'm replicating to. So we're, in this case, replicating the root of my primary to the root of the secondary. Click Save. We'll see that I now have an authorization request waiting for, establishing this relationship. So on the AWS cluster, I go in here and I view that relationship request. I'm going to authorize it. And at this point, replication configuration between these two clusters is complete. Within a few seconds, we will see that replication begins to start, and I can view the details of what's going on with this replication relationship. What's my current throughput? When's the last time it ran? How much data has been written as part of this replication job that's currently running? So very simple to get replication up and running. We can see here now on my AWS file system on the right, it has already replicated that NFS and SMB directory over to it. So the data that exists on my primary site now matches the data that exists in my AWS file system. File systems in Qumulo, when it's a target for replication, that target is read-only. So I can read and write to the primary, but I can only read from the target site. So if I were to try and take some data from my desktop here and copy it to my DR file system or that file system in AWS, we get an access denied because that file system is read-only. Of course, I can take that same data though, drop it on my primary file system. It is, of course, going to let me copy to it. And then within a matter of seconds, because we have this replication relationship set up as continuous replication, we will see that that data that I dropped on my primary file system will gets replicated to my file system in AWS. And, everything is up to date and then sync in the event of a disaster. So, of course, I can browse this, again, read only, so I can see the data that's been copied to it. So just having that copy of my data is it's great, it's helpful. But what we really want to demonstrate here is, well, what happens in the event of a disaster? What happens if my primary Qumulo file system goes offline for some reason? And so we're going to simulate that by just shutting this primary file system down. We're going to go in here, do a cluster shutdown, which is like dropping that cluster off the face of the earth. So in doing so, if I go back to my Windows desktop and then attempt to browse the files share from my primary file system, I'll see that if I click refresh, it just sits and spins. Nothing is responding, nobody's home. But I can still interact with my secondary files from that file system that exists in AWS. It is read-only though, so I need to make this file system writable. And I do that by going to my admin UI for the file system in AWS. I'm going to mark this file system as writable. I get a dialog that tells me this is exactly what's going to happen, what your before and after configuration will look like. Once I've made this file system writable, it does as you would expect. I can now come into my Windows desktop and I can begin writing data to that file system that now lives in AWS. Okay. So very quick, very easy for me to flip over to a secondary Qumulo file system for disaster recovery purposes. But then the next question comes up, right? So I've got all of my data that I've copied into my file system in AWS. I've recovered my primary file system. That cluster is healthy and good, and I want to revert back to the way that things were. Obviously, I've made changes in my file system in AWS. So how do I go about getting those changes back to the primary Qumulo file system? Once this cluster comes online, you'll see here we can now begin to interact with the dashboard again. And you can see that the replication status on here tells me, hey, this replication relationship is disconnected because your target is currently writable. So what we want to do is on the AWS file system, we're going to go in here and we're going to reverse that relationship where for a time being, our file system in AWS is the primary file system. And I want to replicate the changes that have been made during this DR event back to my primary Qumulo file system. So our copy is completed here. I want to come in here, as I mentioned, reverse the relationship. It's going to ask me to confirm a few things here, showing me what the previous and the new configuration will be. Because this is the first time reversing it, I have to tell it what's the IP address of that file system we're reverting back to. So I give it the IP address of Qumulo 1. So I've changed my replication relationship. And now I want to go to my primary Qumulo file system and reconnect that relationship. What this is going to do once the relationship is reconnected is now my writable source is going to be in AWS. That's going to act as my primary for the time being. My target is going to be that Qumulo 1 file system that is going to be read-only, and we're going to reconnect it. Data will start to replicate back from my file system in AWS to my on-premise file system. You can see now it's responding and that the changes that I made on the AWS file system have been replicated back. So life is good. We've got all my data and all my changes from the disaster event back where I want them to be. Now I want to go back to the original state that we were in at the very beginning of this exercise, where my primary file system is Qumulo 1, and I'm replicating to the AWS file system in for DR purposes. Same process. I'm reversing the replication relationship, and then I will reconnect that relationship from the AWS file system side. And that's it. Once I complete this step, my Qumulo 1 file system is now writable, my primary file system. My file system in AWS is there for disaster recovery purposes. And it's that simple to move back and forth between or for failover purposes within Qumulo. The really cool thing about this, and the part worth emphasizing, is what we've demonstrated in these last 10, 12 minutes is not just how replication works in Qumulo. If I've got Qumulo on-premise to Qumulo on-premise, this was Qumulo on-premise to AWS in the cloud, but it also works Qumulo in the cloud to Qumulo in the cloud. So if you wanted Qumulo file systems in different regions for higher availability, or you wanted Qumulo file systems in different cloud providers for redundancy or to share data between different cloud platforms that you're leveraging. So long as it's a Qumulo cluster, so long as there's connectivity between them, the process that we just went through is the same. So with that, I'm actually going to stop talking for a little bit. I'm going to turn it back over to Jessica. We're going to answer some questions you guys may have, but I appreciate you guys taking some time to listen and learn here.
Awesome job. Thank you so much, Brandon. Ben, your presentation as usual was awesome. Jason, can't thank you enough for joining us as well. Like I said in the beginning, our customer testimonials are my favorite part of this. Ben, I see you joined us back as well. Anything you want to chime in before I open it up for questions?
Well, I just wanted to say a couple things. I really loved Brandon's demo because what it showed was the portability and flexibility, which for you as a business owner, the message that I hope that you take away from that is that you have a scalable multi-petabyte file system available to you, which can serve your workloads whenever you're ready to move either on-prem to cloud, cloud to on-prem, data center to data center, cloud to cloud. Like the point there is flexibility. And you get to make business decisions about where you want to run your workloads based on how you want your business to operate, not based on how your storage vendor provides technology. And just for giggles, I thought, if it's okay, I'm going to go off script a little bit, and I'm going to share one other. Can I share my screen real quick, Jessica? Is that possible?
Here we go.
Great. I thought I would show another view of our dashboard. This is what a cluster looks like when it's really in active use, because what Brandon showed you is awesome, but it's really new clusters and how easy it is to create namespaces. This is what it looks like when something's really actively in use. Now, this happens to be actually, for us, kind of a small cluster. This is only a 500 terabyte cluster. This is actually the one we use here. I'm in the office, which I haven't been in that much lately, but now I'm in the office today. This is our office cluster we use in engineering to build our product every day. And you can just see some of the analytics you get in real time about your workflows. You can see your read and write IOPS, obviously your performance, your throughput. You can see latency in real time, which really gives you a picture of what your end users are experiencing, which is super cool as a business owner, really, as a service provider inside your organization. You can say, like, okay, what's it like to be one of my end users? Then you can also drill down and say, like, okay, but I want to go deeper into performance. But not just right now, like, what is the spread of performance look like? What's the distribution? Am I seeing a lot of little jobs or just a few big jobs? How does that look? You can also see, like, how balanced is your performance? Is everybody hammering one node, or is it spread well across nodes? You can also see which clients in your environment are most active, which is super cool, because now you can really start to pinpoint, okay, like back to Jason's example, it's the night before the show has to go out or before the big job has to get finished for the machine learning model. I can actually pinpoint, like, which client is hammering the cluster, so I can call them and get them and figure out, hey, do you mean to be doing this, or is your workload gone berserk? And you can also see in real time what's happening to your capacity. And then, just because I can't help myself, you can drill in on some of these things, like within capacity trends. You can see how has your capacity changed over time and why. And you can pick a time period, for instance, here, and I can say, like, okay, well, it looks like somebody deleted a lot of data. What happened there? And all of those views just give you so much more insight into what's really going on inside your environment, that it makes it much easier, we find, to manage the sprawl of data. That is where, I mean, just think about Jason's example. His data is growing exponentially, but he's really pretty much only got the same one other staff person. So how do you manage that? And the way you manage that is through intelligent systems that can actually make your life easier. So I couldn't help myself. I threw that in there. There was a question from Ben Vone. I think I'm pronouncing your last name right. We release every 2 weeks. Does that, for new features? Yes. Does that include vulnerabilities or bugs? Or are those separated? No, there's only one release cadence at Qumulo. We ship software every 2 weeks. It's inclusive of us. If Microsoft calls us and tells us there's a security vulnerability in SMB that has to be dealt with, or if we need to take an upgrade to some Linux patch, or if we find something in our product that needs to be fixed, that's the same cadence as shipping software every 2 weeks, at shipping new features. It's all the same stuff, and it all meets the same rigorous testing requirements inside the company.
Perfect. Thanks, Ben. Looks like we have one other question, and while I'm reading this off to everybody who's on, please feel free to ask any questions. As a reminder, we're going to be choosing 2 people who ask some questions for some prizes, in the coming days. So I would just encourage you to go ahead and do that. But Ben, Brandon, one other one for you. So does all the data need to be replicated in a failover or failback scenario with Qumulo?
Yeah, good question. So yeah, when we reverse that relationship, as I demonstrated, it's not a re-replication of all the data. The 2 clusters will synchronize with one another and figure out what has changed since that relationship was broken. And it will only replicate back the changes that occurred during that DR event. So it's super efficient, minimizes that time to recovery.
Beautiful. All right, one other one for you guys. So you spoke about this as a DR example. Can replication on Qumulo also be used for more of a backup scenario?
Sure. I mean, it's a secondary copy of your data. I guess depending on your policies and your business, requirements. We have customers that use Qumulo in Azure, in AWS, for just that purpose. It's a secondary copy of their data in case their primary data center, becomes, offline for any reason. And so, yeah, very easy for them to reestablish a new Qumulo file system or recover that original Qumulo file system, just replicate the data back and get back to a previous state.
There's another wrinkle to that. Everything Brandon said was right. We offer some other capabilities that make that a little more feature rich and powerful. So for example, we have a pretty rich snapshotting set of features. And one of the things that we see a lot of customers do is they'll set a snapshot policy on their primary cluster that's maybe like every day or every week with a pretty fast rollover period. So they're getting rid of the snap because maybe that is a smaller, more performant cluster. And then they'll have a larger backup or DR cluster. You'll replicate their data. They'll replicate their data to the secondary cluster, and then they will set a longer term snapshot policy on the target, so that they're essentially replicating their snapshots, but also having differential snapshot policies, which is also really valuable for those of you who are, I'm sure we all are, worried about ransomware and various forms of attack. Just being able to have different differential snapshot policies can make it much easier to have both a sort of belt and suspenders approach, so that you know that you'll have a safe second copy and that safe second copy will live for a long time. I see a question here from Matt. Are there any plans to continue to extend the functionality of Shift to leverage snaps to make it more of a backup tool? The short answer is yes. We see a lot of potential in Shift. There's ways to, you can imagine shifting snapshots. You can imagine snapshotting and then shifting. Or shifting and then snapshotting. So there's a lot of room for us to grow into Shift. The thing we just released, which is super cool, is in our UI, you can now go and select a bucket from AWS S3 and shift that back into our product, which is a big, awesome step forward for the product. So short answer is yes.
And just an important thing to note on that is that shift back doesn't have to be data that originated from Qumulo. It could be data that was generated in AWS, an S3 bucket, and you just want to ingest it into your Qumulo file system.
Great point. Great point.
Love it. I'm loving this this tag team here, Brandon and Ben. This is good.
None of us is as smart as all of us.
We're gonna take it on the road. We'll be in a town near you soon. I'll be on the guitar. He'll be on the voice. It'll be great.
Love it. Awesome. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions coming in. So to everybody, thanks again for joining us. This was all super great information. We'll be sending you a link to download the Gartner Magic Quadrant just to learn a little bit more about Qumulo. And don't forget, we're also going to be reaching out to some of you randomly as we select some prize winners on Monday. And one final reminder, we hope to see you all on Friday. This is our first ever Grump Quest, and it's going to be very fun, interactive. We'll be giving away lots of prizes as you solve some, puzzles along the way. So thanks again, everybody, for attending Qonnect today. Have a great afternoon.